So first of all, Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Ebrahim Rasool. Thank you very much for being here and taking the time to interview with us. We're very appreciative of your presence and your willingness to do an interview with us. So.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you very much for the honor to do this with all of you at SOAS. It's a great honor to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so Bismillah, we'll just get started. That's okay with you? Yeah, so as someone who led both as a Muslim and a public servant, how did you balance faith commitments with the plural realities of governance? What does leadership with God consciousness look like in a multi-faith, multi-ethnic society?
I think it leads you always towards righteousness, justice, compassion, and good. It's more difficult when faith is performative, when you are so conscious about the faith that it needs to do performative things for you, but then the overthinking of it can often withhold you from doing the hard things that faith demands. And so in a sense, the idea of faith allowing you to develop fatwas, edicts from your heart is what needs to be done, so that at that moment it becomes an internal GPS for you. It just makes you turn right or left or go straight. It makes you accelerate and go forward. And that's really what growing up in South Africa was about. Your faith was performance, not the performative. Your faith made you encounter a particular situation and then do the right thing. And then later it calculates what were the risks and what were the consequences thereof. And so I think that the first battle as a Muslim is to embed faith as a GPS. And then the second one is not to resist where it takes you, and overthink what needs to be done. And then fourthly, to really understand the impact of the ayah when Allah says, those who struggle in our way, we will show them the way. And then not second guess what Allah's intention is for you.
So your journey from activism to politics reflects a powerful evolution in how change can be made. What was that transition like for you, learning to navigate new spaces of influence? And how can young people, especially students, continue their fight for justice and moral leadership once their time at university ends?
So in South Africa, political activism is not a choice that you make. You are born in a situation of evil in apartheid South Africa. You are born in a situation where the challengers jump at you, where evil wears a uniform, drives an armored vehicle, and oppresses you when you are black and brown. And so whether you want to or not, activism chooses you, you don't choose activism. So that's the first very important distinction we must make, because many of us say, no, I'll be an activist when I've got my degree behind me. No, let me do that when this is done. And so that is an individual choosing activism. Whereas where there is trouble and danger in a society or in a world, activism chooses you, because as designated by Allah as Khilafatullah fil ard, Allah's deputies on earth, Allah's representatives on earth, you've got to act as Allah would act, and as Allah would want you to act. So that's the very important thing. There's never a perfect moment to be an activist. There is always a moment that requires activism. And so, alhamdulillah, I think that that's what growing up in South Africa was like. Because when I entered high school, that's when I had my first taste of tear gas, of rubber bullets and all of those things at the age of about 14. By the time I came to matric, at the age of about 17, 18, we were leading in the school boycotts of that era. And so one act of justice leads to another. And then we were forming organizations like, for example, the Call of Islam, where we got like-minded people together, all of us, mostly university students. And as university students, activism for justice was the high point of what we studied for. Because again, the description in the Quran is ulul ilm qa'iman bil qist, people of knowledge standing for justice. Knowledge that does not take you to justice is not a beneficial knowledge. And so those things become very crucial. I've never thought of myself as a politician, even when I was a minister or a member of parliament or even the premier or the governor of the province. It always sat uncomfortably to be referred to as a politician because it just has such a bad name. It just has such a negative connotation to it, because those are people who have chosen politics as a career, who have understood their ambition, and at some point they were driven by a desire and a passion for justice, and then they became more and more performative. So that's the image I had of being a politician. So I wince every time someone refers to me as a politician, because I've just seen my work as political activism in different portfolios and with different responsibilities. So when I was Minister of Health, I agitated for an equitable health system. When I was Minister of Finance, I tried to find ways to make the budget work for everyone. I always try to bring the passion of activism into portfolios that I managed, and when I didn't feel that I had that passion or that I could do more with it, those are the times that I would then think of what next must I do. And so for university students, I really think that we must be guided by the text, the Quran and the Sunnah, but we must be moved by the context, the injustices and the evil and the discrimination that we see around us, and as a result of that, I think that we fulfill all the obligations that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants of us.
Yeah, wow, that was some really, really powerful words. And speaking about the call of Islam, why did you feel it was necessary to establish this organization rather than join one of the many existing national anti-apartheid movements? What do you think distinguished you and your organization from the rest of them that already existed?
We were members of what is called the Islamic movement. And so it's an Islamic movement that got its inspiration from great people like, and may Allah have mercy on all of them, Hassan al-Banna, Sayyid Qutb, and all of them. And being part of that movement gave us wonderful things. It taught us to read the Quran in English. It taught us text and context. It taught us activism. But as the anti-apartheid struggle deepened, we found that being a member of the movement wasn't enough, because we were caught up amongst three tendencies within the Muslim community of South Africa. There are your ulama, who were the custodians of the mosques and the madrasas and all of those kind of things, but not always on the battlefield for justice. There was the Islamic movement, who overthought, can you work with non-Muslims? Can you work with communists? Can you make common cause for justice with Christians? And they were overthinking all of those kind of things. And then there were those who were inspired, for example, by the revolution in Iran, and they wanted to replicate revolution wherever they were without necessarily understanding the tactics and strategies that would be required in defeating apartheid. And so, to a large extent, a few of us within the Islamic movement tried to push the envelope of getting them more involved, of saying to them that we need to get into the struggle or history will judge us harshly. And they, by and large, suggested that we should probably not be with them. And so that was the moment that we formed the Call of Islam. And that was immediately two of the first things we did was to affiliate to the liberation movement, and secondly to the interfaith movement of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And so we then found within these two worlds a whole community of people absolutely passionate about justice, every day making one or other sacrifice, prepared to go to prison, prepared to be exiled, prepared to be assassinated. And we saw a level of courage and bravery that we missed in our own community. And we claim to be the community of truth. And we saw truth manifesting in all other communities. And we found an appreciation for how they began to understand Islam. And we began to understand how they can be driven by their ideologies, but we can all be part of a common cause. So the formation of the Call of Islam was absolutely landmark. And the moment you allow yourself to be open to where justice takes you, you then begin to say, if we want justice between black and white, how can we resist justice between men and women and equality? If we want justice in society, we also have an obligation to nature. That's other creation of Allah. And so justice then begins to be like a liquid water form. It goes into every nook and cranny of your existence. And therefore, you get suspicious when someone is passionate about justice for the Palestinians, but wouldn't have a woman on the platform, and would not fight for justice in the neighborhood where they are living, where black people may be oppressed, and so forth. And so I think Call of Islam's approach to life was absolutely holistic, was really courageous, and we presented some of the best people from the Muslim community who joined the underground of the ANC, of the liberation movement, who joined the army of the liberation movement, and who did enormous things and were always respected because it was understood that their drive came from their faith.
So it's very clear to see that your faith played a central role in shaping your response to injustice during the struggle against apartheid. How does Islam guide you from resistance towards reconciliation? And what lessons does that journey hold for Muslims seeking to heal division in their own societies?
The one good thing about, for example, being jailed by the apartheid government is that you get to spend quality time with the Quran. And then you have enough time to, for example, read Surah Hujurat. And then you begin to understand that your suspicion of others may be a sin. Then you begin to understand that where you see conflict or rivalry between people, that you've got to reconcile it. That you then begin to understand that Allah's default position is to salvage the humanity of everyone, whether they are the oppressed or whether they are the oppressor. And that you then begin to understand that if there is even the slightest inclination towards peace, you've got to grab it in order to redeem the humanity of the other. And so we had all the kind of divine precedents within Islam. And when you have someone like Nelson Mandela come out of prison and begin to speak the language of reconciliation, then you begin to understand that this is part of the path that we have been prepared for. And so I think it is a real virtue for South Africa, that we had a Nelson Mandela who had the moral authority coming from 27 years in prison, and that he had the moral authority to take our country away from the abyss and bring it to a point of reconciliation, and to say, how do we create the twin concepts of justice and peace in our society? And we then understood that if you strive too much for justice, you will always be fighting and there will be no peace. If you strive too much for peace, you may have to coexist with injustice, and therefore the combination of peace and justice is reconciliation, so that you do have transitional justice, you do have restorative justice, and not just legal absolute justice.
That's very interesting, especially your point about reconciling peace and justice and how they kind of coexist. So unfortunately, that is all the time that we have today, but thank you very much for being here with us and doing this interview with us. We are very, very appreciative, and I'm sure our viewers will enjoy hearing all of your insights.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you and your student base and to be at SOAS, and I'm glad that you have time for only those few questions. Thank you very much.
I'm sure everyone found it very insightful.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.